Welcome to Ministers Talking a weekly program where Rec BRZ and Rec Z and their guests chat about current affairs, world events, spiritual principles, and any old they want to talk about. Based on the new thought philosophy and ancient wisdoms, Ministers Talking shares a visionary perspective of the evolving spiral called spiritual living. Join us each week as we explore the emerging paradigm of life on planet Earth and beyond.
And hello again, dear ones. Rec BRZ with you over here.
Rec Z right here.
And we're a couple of ministers talking shit. The weekly opportunity. Yeah, it makes me smile every time I hear that intro too. I get a little happy every time I hear that intro.
Yes.
So we're here every week, folks, 7 a.m. Mountain Time on Fridays, to spend a half an hour, look at some of what's going on in the world, some of what's going on in the country, and see if we can bring a spiritual perspective to some of this stuff without whitewashing that, without doing the spiritual bypass and just, oh, it's all good, it's all good. No, some of this stuff sucks. And we got to live through it, and we got to deal with it. So today our topic is say her name. Say her name. Yeah. And we're gonna, so if you haven't paid attention to the news this week, that's okay. We're not, that's no judgment. Just a ruling came back in a trial related to the Breonna Taylor experience and people aren't happy. Yeah. Let's just put it that way. But before we get there, we really do need to say the name Ruth Bader Ginsburg and talk just a little bit this morning about that. I tell you, my wife and I, we were in the car on Friday night when we heard the news, and it hit like a ton of bricks. And not just for the political implications of the future, but really in honor of all this woman has done and did in her lifetime to ensure that we have the freedoms and and women's rights especially. But Z, I think you've created a little bit of an overview for us to honor her.
Yeah. So, she was an amazing woman. She served on the courts for almost 30 years, almost 27. So we'll just say 3 decades and call it good. She was appointed by Clinton in 93. And she was the second woman after Sandra Day O'Connell to serve on the Supreme Court. Too many decisions and writings that she weighed in on same-sex marriages, on Native American issues. I mean, she did some tremendous work and held that middle point to be kind of like a voice of reason. And we're going to miss that. We're going to miss that because right now there does not appear, as of yet, we're hoping somebody stands up and pick up that gavel to be that calm, reasoning voice that can speak to a middle road, if you will, to really start looking at justice and how it gets implemented and how we talk about it and do it and be it. I mean, it goes on and on. And it's highlighted that the need for justice is highlighted in this Breonna Taylor case.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at what has happened and what the charges were, and I wasn't in the room when the decision was made, but I mean, when you look at what you have, 3 officers, 2 of them are not charged. One is charged with something that has nothing to do with the death of Breonna Taylor. But all that came out after they offered the family $12 million. So it just seems kind of shaky. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not a lawyer. I wasn't in the room when they were deciding, but it seems a bit skewed that happened.
Yeah. If it looks like a duck and it acts like a duck. And we've got a group of officers. Again, as you said, 2 of them aren't even charged in the incident. What we know is innocent people lost their lives.
Yeah.
People that did nothing more than try to protect themselves from an unannounced intrusion into their home in the
Right.
middle of in the late hours of the early hours of the morning, late hours of the night. And the guy that gets charged, he gets charged with a crime. And here's how I see it. He gets charged because he missed. Because he didn't hit her or the other
Right.
guy. And what happens, to the best of what we can find, and we've been digging into this most of the morning here, a bullet or a few missed their target, traveled through the wall, and entered an adjoining apartment. When you happen to know it, it's a white family. And the officer is charged with reckless endangerment because his bullets went through the wall and into the other apartment. He's charged with reckless endangerment of the other family. So again, like Z says, there's no charges whatsoever for the actual act of killing Breonna Taylor.
No, none. And this whole this whole idea platform, if you will, of no knock warrants, that issue has been around for a while about is does this work now? Again, I'm not in the legal field and nor the law enforcement field, but there have been enough cases where these no knock warrants have just gone horribly wrong, where you can just bust into a person's domicile, guns blazing, and if you're wrong, then I'm sorry. I mean, that seems to be a problem. And when you look at one of the charges that the boyfriend was charged with originally was attempted murder, which I think was later dropped.
Of a police officer too.
Yes. And the thing is, part of the whole idea of having a firearm in your home for protection is, as I understand it, specifically for these reasons. When someone busts in your house unannounced at the wee hours of the morning and you don't know what it is or who it is or what's going on, that's one of the reasons for having that kind of permit to have the gun. And so now that creates a problem, because we're going to have officers busting into the house, and then to top the cake, right? They didn't find any contraband or whatever it was they were looking for. And I think it was a drug warrant. They did not find it. There was no open warrants on anyone in the house. There was basically no reason for them to knock in there and knock open the door and wind up killing Breonna Taylor.
Yeah. And everything I've heard, these two folks, they're asleep, they're in their bed, there is a bang on the door. Breonna yells out, "Who's there?" and nobody answers. And so her boyfriend grabs the handgun that they have for protection, and then is charged with attempted murder, like premeditated. Like this guy had the gun so that he could kill cops.
No,
folks, what we know is, and this is what Z and I have talked about before, and we've had ex-police officers on this show to discuss this with us. This is the call to reform the police. Let's stop saying defund. People are saying we got to defund the police. No, we've got to reform the police, reform their perspective, their thought patterns, their ideas, because they went in there with the intent to do harm.
Yeah.
And the mistakes that led up to that. Now, to me, that's part of what should be on trial here as well. is who made these mistakes? Because the officers at that point, right, they're not allowed to change. They're not allowed to not fire their gun. The system is designed that way.
Yeah.
It's not designed for justice. It's not designed to protect and serve any longer. Unless you're white, then it's designed to protect and serve.
And the funny thing, funny is that the person that they were looking for was already in custody.
Yes.
So
Exactly.
so here they've busted into the wrong space. They've shot up two individuals who are asleep. Imagine you just, close your eyes for a minute. Imagine you're slept in a dead asleep and somebody used one of them battering rams to just knock your door down and come in and you wake up to that. What would your reactions be? And then when you find out that the person they're looking for is already in police custody, then you say, wow, this, how does this happen? How do things like this happen in a system that with the technology, it should have been easy to figure out that they had this guy in custody?
Right. Yeah, I would agree. There's something here, folks. Right now, we don't pretend to have all the answers. We're not subject matter experts. I'm not. We've said that before. We're not lawyers. We're not police officers. I can't imagine what it's like to live under the threat that every interaction could be your last, could be a suspect, a perpetrator, someone you know is a bad guy, someone you don't know. Right? Um, I can't imagine what it would be like to live under that threat 24 hours a day, 7 days a
Mm-hmm.
week.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another reason we need to reform the police, because these folks shouldn't have to have that's that's not a job for anyone. No one should have to live under, unless maybe in the military, maybe you sign up for it in the military.
Right.
But our police have become militarized,
Yeah.
and there is now a call that we can't let Brianna's name die with this decision. Be,
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I when you were saying that, it just came across my mind. I have a family member who was a former officer, former SWAT member, and we talked about, of course, no details, but he just talked about situations that they found themselves in, and we know folks that if you get into these kind of situation with real, as they say, bad people, it gets tense, right? Because these bullets, this ain't the movies. These are real bullets, and these are real lives, that are being affected here. And so when you look at, when you just think about what it takes to be trained as a police officer or a SWAT officer or any kind of officer that upholds the law that can carry a firearm, let's just be honest. It's a serious job, and
yeah,
it takes serious training on how to use your weapon and all of that. But it also takes serious mental capacity and compassion, if you will, when you're dealing with these situations. We're not going into some uh lighthearted, if you will, disagreements. And oftentimes they're going into, if they're pulling their weapons, they're going into some serious situations. But but over time, if you've been involved with any kind of training, over time you begin to put on that armor of what it is you're being trained, and everything is seen through those eyes. Whether
right.
it's an athlete, whether it's a IT person, or whether it's a law enforcement officer. And so it's easy to see how they begin to suspect everybody. And if we can't readjust this thing and get them better training on these human aspects, and get some human aspect people, if you will, and train them as officers to go on some of these scenes and try to de-escalate if they can, then we're going to continue to have this. And we're not even talking about how the systemic stuff within the system itself has contributed to some of it. We're just talking about pure facts on what it is to hold any kind of job.
Right. Yes. And in your sharing, right, it brings back up for me, there we have the ability to create a system of checks and balances that can ensure, that can could it there should be a flag on the original suspect, right? There's already a flag on his name. There's a warrant for his arrest. How is it that nobody's ever programmed the computers to update that quickly enough? so that the detective on scene in the 5-10, because they didn't just like show up, throw, there was a command tent somewhere. This is a raid. This is a take. They all got together somewhere and briefed on what was going on that day and what they were going to do and who they were looking for, and they all had his picture, I'm sure, and all these things. But nobody knew that he was already sitting downstairs in jail, in a cell. So how tough, it's tough to say that these officers did everything wrong and did everything maliciously. And enough mistakes were made at every level of the system that it shows us we've got something different. We've got to come up with a new vision.
Yeah.
And then we've got to find ways to support that vision moving forward so this never has to happen again.
And the other thing, oftentimes when you hear, or when people hear the the infamous defund the police, right? Which is just definitely a misnomer. That was a bad choice of words when they came up with that.
Right.
It makes people think that we want lawlessness, that we don't want law enforcement, that we don't want a system of justice that looks at things as equally and unbiasedly as possible. Now, you're never going to get that totally out of the system, right? Because everybody has biases just by the way you're raised, your environment, your culture. Now we can lessen that, and we can put checks and balances in the system, as Robert said, to ensure we have looked at as many options, got as much information, as looked at this as humane and in the line of justice as we can. But let's just be frank. If you look at the statistics, the number of cases that go awry, the number of black and brown people who are in jail, if you look at these cases where you see people with the same crime getting totally different sentencing, or options to be back in a parole or probation situation, is totally skewed. And so in this case, we look at, as was just said, we know that they're not going to get a thing 100% right, but you want to make sure that they are as upfront, that they are as on point, and they got the latest information when they begin to say, okay, we're moving to a point now where life may be threatened, mine and somebody else's. So we need to be sure before we make this step. And that doesn't seem to be the case.
Unless you're white, wearing tactical gear, and shoot up a theater or something like that. There are times, folks, where it just seems so ridiculous to me. I saw another one of those memes the other day, and it juxtaposes black person, unarmed, killed by police, with white guy, heavily armed, arrested, and in custody. Right. And if you don't see that there's something that wants to be changed there, then you're part of the problem. If you can't see that, that's got to be changed. Because if you're a white guy, if right now, if I wanted to dress myself up in tactical gear, if the two of us dressed up in tactical gear, took military style weapons, walked into a supermarket and shot the place up, I guarantee you I could walk out with my hands over my head and I'd go to jail. I'd get a beating, but I'd be alive. I can't say I could believe the same thing for my brother.
No.
You'd never make it out of the supermarket.
Yeah. The fact of the matter is, this is a program that tries to look at current issues and provide some spiritual insight and some alternative ways of looking at things. And, you know, I think one of the first things that would be pivotal in reforming or restructuring the police department and the justice system is to begin to look at people as human beings. You know, that whole thing, you're innocent until proven guilty. Well, once you get into that business, whether you want to or not, you want to go home to your family too as a police officer. So
Right.
whether it's by intent or not, I can't say that, but just put yourself in a situation where you're in a deadly situation and you want to go home. You are coming into that situation with a mindset that I'm going home and I'm got to do whatever it's going to take to go home. And you could have the best intentions, be the best person, but when it comes to that, it gets a little different slant. And so I think the more we begin to elevate the idea that we are one human family, regardless of our color, and begin to try and move in that direction in terms of justice, in terms of resolutions of conflicts and things like that, we're going to have a challenge, right? And we know in this system there are some people, black people is one for sure, that came into this country and was placed on the constitutions as 3/5 of a man. You know, I'm doing some genealogy work, and you know, I have relatives that were listed like silverware. Now that is what it is, and I'm you know, I'm not trying to go down that path. That's a whole nother path. But when you have a system that has inherently looked at or classified people in a way that makes them appear or seem less than you are at all levels, education, spiritually, whatever, it becomes a thing that we have to reform. We have to get over that and begin to look at everybody as a loving human being until proven guilty.
Yeah. I agree. And I think that's part of the huge outrage that we're seeing. I know it's part of my outrage. The courts in Louisville have once again determined that the life of of a non-black person, it was more valuable than the life of a black person that was unfortunately killed in
Mm-hmm.
this incident.
Mm-hmm. You
And
know, and some people say, well, they got paid. Well, okay, that that young lady who was in the law enforcement, if you was as an EMT, if you want to put that in that category of a servant, of a public servant, young woman who's had a good career has now gone.
yeah, there's no money that pays for that.
No.
And that's why we're going to continue to say her name, Breonna Taylor, because, and again, folks, we're not, there's a both and here. This isn't us against the police. This isn't really the police against the blacks. We know it, you know, we know all the history. We've done that work and that study, and the system, the intention, the vision behind the system has been perverted. Has been there is a misuse of universal law that is happening here that creates this outcome. And the good news in that is we have the ability to change that individually and collectively. We have the ability to hold a higher vision, to hold our police responsible when they act out of line, to hold our judges responsible, to vote, to hold these
Mm-hmm.
folks responsible, to peacefully let our voices be heard in the streets or on the internet or on the phone. Yes, call your senator. Yes, right? Write your senator. And not just once, but every day.
And you
Every day.
know,
Put them on speed dial until their mailbox is empty. Create a form and change a little bit of it every day and send them an email every morning, because we do, the collective power of humanity, we have the power to change all of this.
yeah.
All of it.
And that starts with having open and honest dialogue.
Yes.
We have to stop drawing lines, I believe, that prevents us from getting together and looking at the fact, no matter what side, whatever your point of view, because we know it's just that, a point of view in a 360-degree situation, circle, right? And so when we think our little slice of that 360 degrees is the end all be all, and there's no discussion about it, and there's no dialogue and looking at it from different perspectives, then we can almost say in the beginning, categorically, this is not going to be as inclusive as it can be. It's not going to support as many people in as many situations as it can be, because we're only looking at it from a certain perspective of a bigger whole. And so we have to sit down and dialogue, and not in a place where we're trying to prove the other person wrong, because now we're moving away from justice. You know, if I'm going to sit down and have a dialogue and the only thing I'm interested in is making myself right, well, we got a problem. We might as well not even talk. And so we have to begin, I believe, that we have to begin to believe that everyone has a preview into a situation or how it can be resolved. And when we first put people as people, humans first, with love and compassion and understanding that life is an ebb and flow, and there are going to be situations where, you know, it gets dicey, as they say, but we need to talk about this and come to some conclusions and ideas and spaces to where we know how to work through these things, where we know how to have dialogue. And you know, we say we can agree to disagree. Well, okay, that's kind of like a cop out, right? I mean, I can come and talk about it, but I'm still going to keep my idea and I'm not going to be moved. That's not what we need to do. We need to try to figure out ways of making these systems better.
Yeah. We can agree to disagree, except when it comes to guns and racism, especially. We're not, I'm not going to agree to disagree when it comes to racism. But, you know, folks, I love what Z is saying, right? Because this puts the responsibility on every one of us to be part of this solution. There is, I saw a phrase today, right? There is no such new thought neutrality is bullshit. Thank you. I'll say thank you off air to the person that I stole that from, but he'll know it if he sees this. So I want to read this real quick, though, because this is part of the Centers for Spiritual Living Global Vision. We envision a world where personal responsibility joins with social conscience in every area of the political, corporate, academic, and social sectors. So police would be involved here, right? Providing sustainable structures to further the emerging global consciousness.
Yes.
Creating sustainable structures. The structure we have in our policing in America right now is no longer sustainable, because they had this trial and 2 cops got shot. And I grieved for their families and their injuries as well. And I didn't see anywhere that either of them actually died, which is great. So injuries without death. That's not sustainable. An eye for an eye and everybody goes blind. My personal belief, there's way too many guns on the street as it is. We start shooting people just because because justice wasn't served. From one perspective, we're going down that road. We've got to find a both and solution here.
Yeah.
Because that's the way the universe works. So, hey, you know, we could keep going, and we've effectively taken up just about every second of our 30-minute allotted time frame here. So before we wrap up, we want to say thank you to the New Thought Media Network and everyone there that makes this program possible. New Thought Media Network, the most positively inspiring media on the planet. There's a link in the show notes to sign up for the newsletter if you'd like to learn more about what this ministry is doing, and a donation link to contribute to keep us on air, keep us broadcasting, keep all the new things coming that are coming. So, Z, final thoughts, brother.
Well, I think, you know, for me, just in a word, harmony, you know, is a thing. And if you listen to a good piece of music, you'll see harmony, and you'll recognize it's definitely different from tuning up your instrument. And right now, everybody's tuning their instrument, trying to be the leader of the band. And I came here to hear a symphony or a good jazz concert with some harmony that creates a sustainable rhythm for life, you know?
I hadn't thought of, I'm going to use that analogy, right? The symphony is tuning up, and I got no idea who's doing. No, nobody's doing anything. Everybody's just yelling at each other.
Exactly.
So, harmony it is, and as we said that, I thought to myself, and go vote.
Yes.
Vote.
Yes.
Even if you think it ain't going to work, vote.
Yeah.
So. All right, folks, we're going to get out of here. We'll be back next week with more ministers talking shit. Until then, have a great week. And hey, if you see something going on in the world or you'd like to join the conversation, drop us an email, ministertalk@ntmedia.org. We'll be sure to take a look at that and perhaps read your message on the air one morning. Thanks for being here, brother. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
We'll see you soon.
Yeah, hey.
And thanks for listening to this week's episode of Ministers Talking. We'll be back again next week with more commentary on current affairs, world events, and any other our ministers want to talk about. And if you found value here, please share our with your friends. Until next time, peace and blessings.